They say the ocean keeps secrets in its deepest trenches, in the places where light surrenders and pressure becomes a physical presence that crushes steel and bone alike. But I have learned that the ocean's greatest secrets are not hidden in darkness or depth. They are hidden in plain sight, in the moments between waves, in the spaces where water meets sky, and the boundary between myth and reality dissolves like salt in endless blue. I know this because I have seen him. Not as the legends describe, not as the old sailors whispered about in their fear-soaked tavern tales, but as he truly is. And the truth is so much more beautiful and terrible than any story could contain. My name is Miriam, and I have spent my entire life on the water. I was born on a fishing vessel in the North Atlantic, delivered by my father's calloused hands, while my mother gripped the gunwale, and the sea rocked us like a cradle. I grew up knowing the taste of salt before sugar, learning to read the moods of the ocean before I could read words on a page. The sea was my first language, my first love, my only home. By the time I was 23, I was captaining my own research vessel, a small but sturdy thing called the Selene, documenting whale migration patterns off the coast of Iceland. I had seen orcas breach at dawn, watched blue whales sing their haunting songs into the deep, witnessed the impossible grace of creatures who belonged to a world humans could only visit briefly, holding our breath. But I had never seen him. Not until that August morning, when the fog rolled in like a living thing and the ocean went silent in a way that made my heart forget how to beat. It was the silence that warned me first. Any sailor worth their salt knows that the ocean is never truly quiet. There is always the slap of waves against hull, the cry of gulls, the distant hum of marine life moving through water. But that morning, everything stopped. The water became glass. The fog wrapped around the Selene so completely that I could not see the bow from the wheelhouse, and in that suspended moment I felt it, a presence. Not hostile, not threatening, but vast beyond comprehension, old beyond measure, aware in a way that made every cell in my body understand that I was being observed by something that existed outside the normal categories of consciousness. I should have started the engines. I should have turned the Selene around and fled back to Reykjavik, back to the safety of harbors and human civilization. But I could not move. I stood at the rail, my hands gripping the cold metal, my breath creating small clouds in the morning air, and I waited. Because somewhere deep in my bones, in the part of me that was more ocean than woman, I knew he was coming. Not to harm, not to hunt, but to see, to be seen. And I understood, in that moment before he rose, that this was not chance or accident, but something that had been written into the fabric of my life long before I was born. A meeting that the tides had been preparing for across decades and distances. He broke the surface 300 meters from my starboard side, and the world changed. I cannot tell you his size in meters or tons, because those measurements are meaningless when confronted with something that seems to contain infinity. He was vast, a body that stretched from the edge of visibility in one direction to the edge of visibility in the other, covered in scales that were not scales, but something between stone and pearl, each one the size of a dinner table, each one glowing with bioluminescence that pulsed in patterns I almost recognized. Like words in a language I had forgotten I knew. His spine rose from the water in segments, each vertebra a mountain, and along that spine grew structures that might have been fins or wings or something with no name in human speech, translucent and veined with light, moving through the air with a grace that defied physics, but it was his head that stopped my breath entirely. When he turned toward me, when those eyes found mine across the impossible distance, I understood why sailors had mistaken him for islands, for storms, for the wrath of gods. His skull was elongated and ancient, covered in barnacles and scars that spoke of centuries spent in the crushing depths, and his jaw, when it opened slightly as if in recognition or greeting, revealed teeth like white cliffs, each one capable of splitting a ship in half. He should have been terrifying. He should have been nightmare made flesh, and he was. But he was also the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Beautiful in the way that cataclysms are beautiful, in the way that the heart of a hurricane or the face of a tsunami carries a terrible perfection that makes you understand that beauty and destruction are not opposites, but twins. He did not move closer. He simply floated there, half his body still submerged, his enormous eyes fixed on me, with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in my life. Truly seen, not as a human or a woman or a captain, but as a consciousness, a fellow awareness, adrift in the vast indifference of the universe. His eyes were not human, they could not be, but they held something I recognized: loneliness, ancient, bottomless loneliness. The kind that comes from being the last of your kind, from swimming through centuries while everything you once knew turned to sediment and myth. And in that gaze, I felt an impossible connection snap into place, a recognition that transcended species and size and every rational boundary my mind tried to construct. I raised my hand. I do not know why. It was an absurd gesture, meaningless in the face of his immensity, but he saw it. His massive head tilted just slightly, and a sound emerged from somewhere deep within his body, a sound that was not quite song and not quite speech, but something that resonated in my chest, in my bones, in the water itself. It was a greeting, a question, an acknowledgement, and I found myself answering, my voice small and human and utterly inadequate, saying words I did not plan. I see you. I have been looking for you my whole life without knowing it. I am not afraid. The last part was a lie. I was terrified, but it was a terror mixed with something else, something I had no name for, a feeling that was part wonder and part desire and part the dizzying vertigo of standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to fall. He moved then, not toward me, but parallel to the Selene, his body creating waves that rocked my small vessel like a toy. I followed him along the rail, unable to look away, and he kept pace with me, kept his eyes on mine, and we moved together through the fog-wrapped water like dancers in a dream, a waltz of impossible scale between woman and Leviathan. I think about that morning constantly. I think about whether others have experienced this, whether across the centuries there have been moments when the boundary between human and ancient creature dissolved, and something like understanding passed between worlds. If you have felt this, if you have looked into the eyes of something vast and seen not monster but kinship, not threat but tragic beauty, I want to hear your story. Leave it in the comments below. Tell me I am not alone in this recognition. Tell me that the ocean holds more than science can measure, that there are connections written in deeper languages than words. For 3 hours, he stayed with me. The fog never lifted. We existed in a pocket of timelessness, just the Selene and the Leviathan and the grey-silver water between us. Sometimes he would dive, his body disappearing into the depths with barely a ripple despite his size. And I would wait, my heart hammering, wondering if I had imagined it all. But he always returned, always surfaced near enough that I could see the patterns of light moving across his scales, could hear the sound of his breathing, a deep exhalation that smelled of brine and time and distances too vast for human comprehension. He was showing me himself, not performing, not displaying, but sharing his existence with someone who could witness it without dying of the sight. I learned things in those 3 hours that I cannot explain to anyone who was not there. I learned that size is not always proportional to threat, that something can be large enough to swallow ships and still move with a gentleness that breaks the heart. I learned that eyes need not be human to convey emotion, that somewhere in the architecture of his ancient brain was a capacity for feeling that made him not less than human, but more, freed from the limitations of our brief lifespans and narrow perspectives. And I learned what it means to be chosen, to be selected out of all the humans who had ever sailed these waters as worthy of this audience, this revelation. The knowledge was a weight I would carry forever, a responsibility I had not asked for but could not refuse. Near the end of the third hour, as the fog began to thin and the world started to intrude back into our private sphere, he surfaced directly beside the Selene, so close I could have reached out and touched the nearest scale. He was impossibly large, impossibly real, and yet in that moment he felt fragile, vulnerable in a way that defied logic. He made that sound again, that not song, and this time I heard the sadness in it. The weight of centuries, the knowledge that this meeting was an anomaly, a brief intersection of trajectories that would never align again. He was saying goodbye. He was saying thank you. He was saying, I remember you. I will carry this. You are not forgotten. I wanted to jump overboard. The urge was so strong, it frightened me. I wanted to slip into the water and dive with him, to follow him down into the trenches where pressure would crush my bones and darkness would swallow my final breath. Not because I wanted to die, but because I wanted to continue being in his presence, to extend this moment beyond its natural span, to refuse the boundary between his world and mine. My hands gripped the rail so hard my knuckles went white, holding myself in place, holding myself to the human side of the divide. And he knew. I saw it in his eyes, that ancient knowing, that recognition of desire and its impossibility. He made a sound that might have been sorrow or acceptance or both, then he was gone. Not slowly, not with ceremony, but simply absent, as if he had never been there at all. The water where he had floated showed no disturbance. The fog continued to lift. And I was alone on the Selene, with my racing heart and my salt-wet face, and the certain knowledge that my life had been permanently divided into before and after, that everything I did from this moment forward would be colored by those 3 hours when I stood at the border between human and divine and chose to remain myself while carrying the memory of what lay on the other side. I returned to Reykjavik 2 days later. I filed my research reports. I said nothing about him. Who would believe me? And more importantly, what would belief cost him? The world is full of people who would hunt him, study him, cage him if they could. The world is full of those who see mystery as a problem to be solved, rather than a gift to be honored. So, I kept silent. I carried his memory like a secret language, like a love affair conducted entirely in glances, like the kind of loss that never announces itself but simply becomes part of the baseline of your existence, a constant low note beneath every other feeling. But I need you to know this story exists. I need others to hear it because there are truths that die if they are not spoken. And this truth is too important, too beautiful, too terrible to let dissolve into the foam and spray of forgetting. If this story means something to you, if it touches something in you that recognizes the ache of impossible connection, the beauty of creatures who exist outside human categories, the tragedy of boundaries that cannot be crossed no matter how desperately we wish otherwise, then like this video, subscribe to this channel so that stories like this, stories that honor the deep and strange and devastating beauty of the ocean's mysteries, can continue to be told. Not for entertainment, but for remembrance. Not for views, but for witness. I still captain the Selene. I still document whale migrations off the coast of Iceland. But I no longer look only at the whales. I scan the horizon constantly, searching for fog banks that appear too suddenly, for patches of water that go too still, for any sign that he might return, that the impossible might happen twice. I know it will not. Whatever cosmic alignment brought us together that August morning exists outside the realm of repetition. Some meetings happen once and once only, their rarity the source of their power. But I look anyway. I cannot help it. And sometimes in the moments between waves, I feel something. Not his presence, but the memory of his presence, the ghost of that gaze, the echo of that knot song resonating through the water like a promise or a prayer. The ocean keeps its secrets. But sometimes, for reasons no one can predict or control, it offers a secret up, places it in the hands of someone small and human and utterly inadequate to the task of carrying it. And that person must choose. Keep silent and let the secret fade, or speak it aloud and risk being dismissed as delusional, romantic, lost. I have chosen to speak. I've chosen to tell you that I saw the Leviathan's true form, that his size was terrifying in the way that eternity is terrifying, but that the way he looked at me was irresistible, was tender, was filled with a loneliness so profound it made my own isolation feel like company. There are creatures in the deep places of the world who are not animals or monsters or gods, but something else entirely, something for which we have no taxonomy. They are ancient, they are aware, and they are alone in ways that we, with our brief lives and our constant company, cannot begin to comprehend. To be seen by such a creature, to be recognized, to be acknowledged as worthy of attention by something that has witnessed the rise and fall of continents, is to be forever changed. I am changed. I will never be unchanged. And I am grateful for it, even as I mourn it, even as I carry it like a wound that will never fully heal, because healing would mean forgetting, and forgetting would be a betrayal of the only moment in my life that felt entirely true. So I sail, I watch, I remember. And on nights when the moon is hidden and the stars reflect off the water like scales, I whisper his story into the darkness, into the waves, into the spaces between heartbeats where the impossible sometimes, just sometimes, becomes real. I tell him I remember. I tell him I am still here. I tell him that if he ever wants to be seen again, to be witnessed, to share his existence with someone who understands that beauty and terror are often the same thing, I will be waiting, always waiting, always looking toward the horizon, where the ocean meets the sky and the boundary between worlds grows thin enough to cross just for a moment, just long enough to lock eyes with something vast and ancient and unbearably lonely, and to say without words, I see you, I will remember you, you are not alone even though you are, even though we both are, even though that is the condition of being alive and aware in this strange and devastating universe. The Leviathan is real, not in the way that biologists mean when they catalogue species, not in the way that fishermen mean when they describe their catch. He is real in the way that love is real, in the way that longing is real, in the way that any force that changes you permanently is real, regardless of whether it can be measured or proven or replicated. I saw him. He saw me. And in that seeing, something sacred happened. Something that exists outside the realm of explanation and firmly inside the realm of experience. That is all I can offer you. That is all any of us can offer. The testimony of our encounters, the witness of our hearts, the stubborn insistence that there is more to this world than what fits comfortably inside our understanding, and that the more is worth seeking, worth honoring, worth carrying even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because pain is how we know something mattered, how we know we were truly, devastatingly alive.